Hello everybody. I'm just going to do one of many things I forgot to do before I hit the go live button. Uh-oh. My microphone hasn't been plugged in. That's really cool. That's great. I don't know how to switch or if you'll be listening to my computer microphone, so apologies if that's what happens. But yep, we all made it here again. Well, I did, and Flora did, and Naivy's around here somewhere. Even though some of you do think that Villette is the most relentlessly grim book in the world and you can't really handle it. I like it because it's so grim. It's just Charlotte Bronte refusing to give you anything. She's just like, you know what? Sometimes heroines aren't beautiful. And sometimes heroines aren't nice either. And sometimes life isn't very nice. And you're like, oh, Charlotte, come on. And then the older you get, the more you're like, yeah, that's kind of fair, actually, Charlotte. What can you do? I've been having record lows here, so I've been sitting with my snood up like some kind of mad wimple. Although it is thematically appropriate because, you know, there are going to be nuns. Oh yeah, she's right. She's right about a lot of things. Move this back. That way. Oh, that's okay. Move that up there. Absolutely. Absolutely. But you can't be like an anti-heroine in, you know, the friggin' 1830s or whenever she actually wrote it. I need to look up the... Hey, Josh! I need to look up the actual publication date of Villette. It's a story about how, you know, women who aren't beautiful or witty or whatever just kind of suffer alone in life. They don't really get a free pass on things. And but they are still real people. She's like, yeah, I'm here. I've been watching you guys from the beginning. I am a person, you know. I'm Lucy. Not that you would care. I didn't even introduce myself to you until the second chapter. So yeah, she's prickly, but she's got a right to be. So, going to do a little bit of a recap. Oh, and before we do, I am unbelievably happy that I have treatment again tomorrow. I'm back on twice weekly. I was just thinking, oh my God, I get to feel better again tomorrow. Just kind of a miracle. So thank you, all of you, for helping me get through it. Published 1853. Oh, Danny. First the worst, second the best, third the golden princess. That's me. The boys at my school tried to change it to the golden eagle. Who wouldn't want to be a golden princess? So, the beginning of Villette, we're not really introduced to the protagonist at all, even though she's the narrator. She says that some time ago, maybe Golden Eagle didn't start there. Maybe one person knew somebody from another school who used it that way. I don't know. We just thought it was pathetic. Like, oh no, the boys are at it again. Okay, so first couple chapters, Lucy says, well, doesn't really tell you her name because it's not very important to her at that point. She says that she had an aunt called Mrs. Breton who lived rotten egg. Third place is not a bad place to be, unless there are only 3 of you. Right, she's not her aunt, she's a godmother. They live in the town of Breton, which is in some area of France or Belgium or something. And as a young girl, I don't know how old Lucy is at this point. She hasn't actually told us. She was staying with Mrs. Breton. Don't know where her parents were. She hasn't told us. And one day, an even littler girl turned up at the house called Polly. And Polly is just so precocious. She's so very dignified. She's like a tiny little adult walking around, but at the same time, so adorable and so beautiful. And everyone just caters to her whims the whole time. And the dashing, handsome teenage son of Mrs. Breton immediately starts picking on her and teasing her and stuff and making her go all red because he can. No one's bothering to talk to Lucy at all. Hey, Evelyn. Polly is totally creepy, which is why I give her a stupid voice. She's an angel and must not be vexed. She really is just as boring as she seems to be. Well, no, more boring than she seems to be because she's pretty. And Lucy doesn't come out and say it, but she has complete contempt, and you can feel it in the story. She has contempt for Polly and Polly's dad even, and young Graham, the 16-year-old hunk, or probably how old he is. She thinks everyone is really dumb for giving into all Polly's whims and this kind of thing. Yes. Well, her name's Paulina, but they call her Polly. She should try being 2'8". That's exactly right, Evelyn. I've tried it myself, but people hate it. What I do is I crawl around, but on the front part of me, I have one of those little standing up outfits that they put on dogs to make them look like they have 2 feet for a Halloween costume. Literally everyone hates it. Apart from a certain alt-right personality I cannot name. So in the second one, Polly's father comes by and he's like, yep, I still can't keep my kid. I love her though. Anyway, goodbye. And Lucy tells us her name. It's Lucy Snow. Do you want to go outside, darling? Want to go outside, Ivy? Want to go outside? Oh, you do? Yeah, they are a pack of enablers. It's never made clear how young this child is. Like, she sleeps in a crib, but she's also old enough to pour her dad coffee and pass it to him. But this is the olden days, so it's just impossible. We can't know. Oh, and yeah, the second thing that I was going to tell you guys before we started, I know I uploaded a video of Niobe purring, the first time I've ever heard her purr, and you can't hear the purring. Well, I can't anyway on the video, but it was very real, and it was there, and it was important. I didn't think she could purr. Kind of feel bad about that now. I was just like, oh, I'm so great with cats. If she could purr, she'd have done it by now. And also, hello, Anne. I know you'll be watching later. Hi, Daniel. If you're watching later, hi Grace, if you're there as well in the room, forced to be watch things. That's the part about being single that I like the most. It was real purring. First, I thought she was having an asthma attack or something, but it sounded so weird, like she was not used to doing it. Niobe the stray cat. Niobe the incredibly well-fed cat who feels utterly comfortable in my home and on my bed. Yeah, one of us is in denial. Okay, Villette. 10 minutes in, we're starting Villette by Charlotte Bronte. Chapter 3, The Playmates. Mr. Holmes stayed 2 days. Hey, Pan and Scan, you are right in time for the chapter to start. Mr. Home is the dad of Polly, the useless baby. Stray cat. She started off that way. Why are you shaming me for being a goober and a loser and an idiot who feeds everything and can't let go of any animal? Mr. Holmes stayed 2 days. During his visit, he could not be prevailed on to go out. He sat all day long by the fireside, sometimes silent, sometimes receiving and answering Mrs. Bretton's chat, which was of just the proper sort for a man in his morbid mood. Not over-sympathetic, yet not too uncongenial. Sensible, and even with a touch of the motherly, she was sufficiently his senior to be permitted this touch. My New Zealand friends probably think I talk a little bit weird in these videos, but I'm just trying to enunciate a little bit, a tiny bit better than I usually do. So you don't just hear home stay 2 days and during his visit he couldn't be prevailed to go out because he sat all day by the fireside and something's silent and somebody's receiving notes from his Bretton's cat. You know? And you'd have to go, yeah, nah, and I'd be like, this cat's staring at me and it's putting me off. As to Paulina, or Polly, the child was at once happy and mute, busy and watchful. Her father frequently lifted her to his knee. She would sit there till she felt or fancied he grew restless. Then it was, Papa, put me down. I shall tire you with my weight. And the mighty burden slid to the rug, and establishing itself on carpet or stool just at Papa's feet, the white workbox and the scarlet speckled handkerchief came into play. This handkerchief, it seems, was intended as a keepsake for Papa, and must be finished before his departure. Consequently, the demand on the seamstress's industry, she accompanied about a score of stitches in half an hour, was stringent. Yeah, well, I have to go through the stages of grief in order. You can just feel the contempt for the people around her in everything Lucy says, even when it's not explicitly stated. I really think we have done kind of a theme. The evening, by restoring Graham to the maternal roof, his days were passed at school, brought us an accession of animation, a quality not diminished by the nature of the scenes, pretty sure to be enacted between him and Miss Paulina. If anyone wasn't here yesterday, he picked her up, and it affronted her dignity very much. I know! She's just sitting there like, well, no one's talking to me. But I wouldn't want you to anyway. You are all so dumb. I'm not saying that was me as a teenager and a young adult and a middle-aged adult and a child and a baby and probably a fetus, but can kind of empathize there. A distant and haughty demeanour had been the result of the indignity put upon her the first evening of her arrival. Her usual answer when he addressed her was, I can't attend to you. I have other things to think about. And being implored to state what things? Business. Okay, when Polly's being mean to Graham, that is actually quite funny. She reminds me of my sister. Graham would endeavour to seduce her attention by opening his desk and displaying its multifarious contents: seals, bright sticks of wax, penknives, and a miscellany of engravings, some of them gaily coloured, which he had amassed from time to time. Nor was this powerful temptation wholly unavailing. Her eyes, furtively raised from her work, cast many a peep towards the writing table, rich in scattered pictures. An etching of a child playing with a Blenheim spaniel happened to flutter to the floor. "Pretty little dog," said she, delighted. Graham prudently took no notice. Ere long, stealing from her corner, she approached to examine the treasure more closely. The dog's great eyes and long ears, and the child's hat and feathers were irresistible. "Nice picture," was her favourable criticism. "Well, you may have it," said Graham. She seemed to hesitate. The wish to possess was strong, but to accept would be a compromise of dignity. No. She put it down and turned away. "You won't have it then, Polly?" "I would rather not, thank you." "Shall I tell you what I'll do with the picture if you refuse it?" She half turned to listen. "Cut it into strips for lighting the taper." "No." "But I shall." "Please don't." Graham waxed inexorable on hearing the pleading tone. He took the scissors from his mother's work casket. Yes, it does say work casket, not basket. Bit jarring. "Here goes," said he, making a menacing flourish, right through Fido's head and splitting little Harry's nose. "No, no, no!" This dude, he would be smacked down so hard if he was my nephew. "Then come to me. Come quickly, or it's done." She hesitated, lingered, but complied. "Now will you have it?" he asked, as she stood before him. "Please." "But I shall want payment." "How much?" "A kiss." And when an adult asks for a kiss from a child in this time, it is on the cheek. He's "Give the picture first into my hand." Polly, as she said this, looked rather faithless in her turn. Graham gave it. She absconded, a debtor, darted to her father and took refuge on his knee. Graham rose in mimic wrath and followed. She buried her face in Mr. Holmes' waistcoat. "Papa, papa, send him away." "I would not be sent away," said Graham. "Come on, papa, come on, do something. Jesus." With face still averted, she held out her hand to keep him off. "Then I shall kiss the hand," said he. At that moment it became a miniature fist, and dealt him payment in a small coin that was not kisses. There are times when you can like Polly. Graham, not failing in his way to be as wily as his little playmate, retreated, apparently quite discomfited. He flung himself on a sofa, and resting his head against the cushion, lay like one in pain. Polly, finding him silent, presently peeped at him. His eyes and face were covered with his hands. She turned on her father's knee and gazed at her foe anxiously and long. Graham groaned. "Papa, what is the matter?" she whispered. "You had better ask him, Polly." "Is he hurt?" Brackets groan sound. "He makes a noise as if he were," said Mr. Home. "Mother," suggested Graham feebly, "I think you had better send for the doctor. Oh, my eye!" Renewed silence, broken only by sighs from Graham. "If I were to become blind," suggested this last. His chastiser could not bear the suggestion. She was beside him directly. "Let me see your eye. I did not mean to touch it, only your mouth, and I did not think I hit so very hard." Silence answered her. Her features worked. "I am sorry, I am sorry." She also meowed really loudly, but I don't know if you heard that one. Then succeeded emotion, faltering, weeping. "Have done trying that child, Graham," said Mrs. Bretton. "It's all nonsense, my pet," cried Mr. Home. And Graham once more snatched her aloft, and she again punished him, and while she pulled his lion's locks, turned him the naughtiest, rudest, worst, untruest person that ever was. So that was a charming anecdote just there. Yeah, she's just sitting in the room, like, not being addressed really by anybody. They're like, "Oh, the kids are just playing. Isn't that cute?" And she's like, "All of this is done, but I like the bit where Graham got punched." Yeah. You gotta warm up to Lucy, really. Well, you don't have to, but she'll never warm up to you, which is kind of reassuring in its way. On the morning of Mr. Holmes' departure, he and his daughter had some conversation in a window recess by themselves. I heard part of it. "Couldn't I pack my box and go with you, Papa?" she whispered earnestly. I like giving her a stupid voice. He shook his head. "Should I be a trouble to you?" "Yes, Polly." "Because I am little." "Because you are little and tender. It is only great strong people that should travel. But don't look sad, my little girl, it breaks my heart. Papa will soon come back to his Polly." Indeed, I am not sad. Scarcely at all." "Polly would be sorry to give Papa pain, would she not?" Sorrier than sorry." "Then Polly must be cheerful, not cry at parting, not fret afterwards. She must look forward to meeting again, and try to be happy meanwhile. Can she do this?" "She will try." "I see she will. Farewell then, it is time to go." "Now? Just now?" "Just now." Yeah, it's very hard to gauge. I mean, yeah, it's very hard to gauge what kind of age group we're talking about. She held up quivering lips. Her father sobbed, but she, I remarked, did not. Having put her down, he shook hands with the rest present and departed. When the street door closed, she dropped on her knees at a chair with a cry. "Papa!" It was low and long, a sort of "Why hast thou forsaken me?" Polly's age is whatever is funniest, although I am just picturing Ben Shapiro. Not like gender swapped or in a little frilly Victorian girl's dress or anything, just in his little suit, just trotting around the nursery, getting mad when he gets picked up and flown through the air against his will. That's how I picture it. But that's the wonderful thing about books. You can just imagine anything you like. You can be reading a book and imagine you're reading a different book. So why hast thou forsaken me? During an ensuing space of some minutes, I perceived she endured agony. She went through, in that brief interval of her infant life, emotions such as some never feel. It was in her constitution. She would have more of such instants if she lived. Nobody spoke. Mrs. Bretton, being a mother, shed a tear or two. Graham, who was writing, lifted up his eyes and gazed at her. I, Lucy Snow, was calm. The little creature, thus left unharassed, did for herself what none other could do, contended with an intolerable feeling, and ere long, in some degree, repressed it. That day she would accept solace from no one, nor the next day. She grew more passive afterwards. On the third evening, as she sat on the floor, worn and quiet, Graham, coming in, took her up gently without a word. She did not resist. She rather nestled in his arms as if weary. When he sat down, she laid her head against him. In a few minutes she slept, and he carried her upstairs to bed. I was not surprised that next morning the first thing she demanded was, "Where is Mr. Graham?" I know we're looking at this through a very 21st century lens, but children can just be sweet to each other for no reason. It happened that Graham was not coming to the breakfast table. He had some exercises to write for that morning's class and had requested his mother to send a cup of tea into the study. Polly volunteered to carry it. Probably not 2 years old then. She must be busy about something and look after somebody. The cup was entrusted to her, for, if restless, she was also careful. As the study was opposite the breakfast room, the doors facing across the passage, my eye followed her. "What are you doing?" she asked, pausing on the threshold. "Writing," said Graham. "Why don't you come to take breakfast with your mamma?" "Too busy." "Do you want any breakfast?" "Of course." "There then." And she deposited the cup on the carpet like a jailer putting a prisoner's pitcher of water through his cell door, and retreated. Presently she returned. "What will you have besides tea? What to eat?" "Anything good. Bring me something particularly nice. There's a kind little woman." She came back to Mrs. Bretton. "Please, ma'am, send your boy something good." It's just sickly. It's so sickly, but Lucy knows this. She's doing this to us on purpose. "You shall choose for him, Polly. What shall my boy have?" She selected a portion of whatever was best on the table, and ere long came back with a whispered request for some marmalade, which was not there. Having got it, however, for Mrs. Bretton refused the pair nothing, Graham was shortly after heard lauding her to the skies, promising that when he had a house of his own, she should be his housekeeper, and perhaps, if she showed any culinary genius, his cook. And, as she did not return and I went to look after her, I found Graham and her breakfasting tete-a-tete, she standing at his elbow and sharing his fare, excepting the marmalade, which she delicately refused to touch, lest, I suppose, it should appear that she had procured it as much on her own account as his. She constantly evinced these nice perceptions and delicate instincts. The league of acquaintanceship thus struck up was not hastily dissolved. On the contrary, it appeared that time and circumstances served rather to cement than loosen it. Ill assimilated as the two were in age, sex, pursuits, etc., they somehow found a great deal to say to each other. As to Paulina, I observed that her little character never properly came out, except with young Bretton. Yeah. I mean, this is Lucy Snow's story, and this is the third chapter she spent telling us about other people and what's going on with them. She's so guarded, she can't even start telling us her own story immediately. But yeah, you're right. As she got settled and accustomed to the house, she proved tractable enough with Mrs. Bretton, but she would sit on a stool at that lady's feet all day long, learning her task or sewing, or drawing figures with a pencil on a slate, and never kindling once to originality, or showing a single gleam of the peculiarities of her nature. I ceased to watch her under such circumstances. She was not interesting. But the moment Graham's knock sounded of an evening, a change occurred. She was instantly at the head of the staircase. Usually her welcome was a reprimand or a threat. "You have not wiped your shoes properly on the mat. I shall tell your mamma." "Little busybody, are you there?" "Yes, and you can't reach me. I am higher up than you," peeping between the rails of the banister as she could not look over them. "Polly, my dear boy," such was one of her terms for him, adopted in imitation of his mother. I am fit to faint with fatigue, declared Graham, leaning against the passage wall in seeming exhaustion. Dr. Digby, the headmaster, has quite knocked me up with overwork. Just come down and help me to carry out my book. I mean, knocked up did used to mean being made very tired or being woken in the middle of the night, but nowadays I just read that and I think, hang on, the headmaster got him pregnant? Is this Omega verse? I haven't read any, but oh, Charlotte Bronte began that. Interesting. Come down and help me carry up my book. Aha! You're cunning. Not at all, Polly. It is positive fact. I am as weak as a rush. Come down. Your eyes are quiet like the cat's, but you'll spring. Spring? Nothing of the kind. It isn't in me. Come down. Perhaps I may, if you'll promise not to touch, not to snatch me up, and not to whirl me around. I couldn't do it, sinking into a chair. Then put the books down on the first step and go 3 yards off. This being done, she descended warily, and not taking her eyes from the feeble Graham. Of course, her approach always galvanized him to new and spasmodic life. The game of romps was sure to be exacted. Sometimes she would be angry. Sometimes the matter was allowed to pass smoothly, and we could hear her say as she led him upstairs, "Now, my dear boy, come and take your tea. I am sure you must want something." Ugh, it's just sickly. It was sufficiently comical to observe her as she sat beside Graham while he took that meal. In his absence, she was a still personage, but with him the most officious, fidgety little body possible. I often wished she would mind herself and be tranquil. But no, herself was forgotten in him. He could not be sufficiently well waited on, nor carefully enough looked after. He was more than the Grand Turk in her estimation. And I don't know who the Grand Turk is, but he sounds important. She would gradually assemble the various plates before him, and when one would suppose all he could possibly desire was within his reach, she would find out something else. "Ma'am," she would whisper to Mrs. Bretton, "perhaps your son would like a little cake. Sweet cake, you know. There is some in there," pointing to the sideboard cupboard. Mrs. Bretton, as a rule, disapproved of sweet cake at tea, but still the request was urged. "One little piece, only for him, as he goes to school. Girls such as me and Miss Snow don't need treats, but he would like it." Blah. It's not really Polly's fault. She's been brought up to be ridiculous. Blame you, Queen Victoria. Graham did like it very well, and almost always got it. To do him justice, he would have shared his prize with her to whom he owed it, but that was never allowed. To insist was to ruffle her for the evening. To stand by his knee and monopolize his talk and notice was the reward she wanted, not a share of the cake. I would absolutely go straight for the cake. Polly's too little to know that there's no point listening to boys when they're talking. Just checking the pages. With curious readiness did she adapt herself to such themes as interested him. One would have thought the child had no mind or life of her own, but must necessarily live, move, and have her being in another. Now that her father was taken from her, she nestled to Graham, and seemed to feel by his feelings, to exist in his existence. Is feeling familiar to anybody? She learned the names of all his schoolfellows in a trice. She got by heart their characters as given from his lips. A single description of an individual seemed to suffice. She never forgot or confused identities. She would talk with him the whole evening about people she had never seen, and appear completely to realize their aspect, manners, and dispositions. Some she learned to mimic. An undermaster, who was an aversion of young Bretons, had, it seems, some peculiarities, which she caught up in a moment from Graham's representation and rehearsed for his amusement. This, however, Mrs. Breton disapproved and forbade. In a trice. The pair seldom quarrelled, yet once a rupture occurred in which her feelings received a severe shock. I mean, Polly is so wonderful and perfect. If you can bear to listen to the next bit, where she has her feelings hurt. But if you can't, I understand if you want to mute for a little while. One day, Graham, on the occasion of his birthday, had some friends, lads his own age, to dine with him. Paulina took much interest in the coming of these friends. She had frequently heard of them. They were amongst those of whom Graham oftenest spoke. After dinner, the young gentlemen were left by themselves in the dining room, where they soon became very merry and made a good deal of noise. Chancing to pass through the hall, I found Paulina sitting alone on the lowest step of the staircase, her eyes fixed on the glossy panels of the dining room door, where the reflection of the hall lamp was shining, her little brow knit in anxious meditation. "What are you thinking about, Polly?" No, Lucy's not trapped at home. She's just... no one's really interacting with her." Nothing particular, only I wish that door was clear glass, that I might see through it. The boys seem very cheerful, and I want to go to them. I want to be with Graham and watch his friends." The voice I'm giving her is getting stupider and stupider. I'm not going to even try and stop it. "What hinders you from going?" "I feel afraid, but may I try, do you think? May I knock at the door and ask to be let in?" I thought perhaps they might not object to have her as a playmate, and therefore encouraged the attempt. "Lucy, bitch." She knocked, too faintly at first to be heard, but on a second essay the door unclosed. Graham's head appeared, and he looked in high spirits, but impatient. "What do you want, you little monkey?" "To come to you." "Do you indeed? As if I would be troubled with you. Away to Mamma and Mistress Snow, and tell them to put you to bed." The auburn head and the bright, flushed face vanished. The door shut peremptorily. Peremptorily? Peremptorily? Never heard it out loud. She was stunned. "Why does he speak so? He never spoke so before," she said in consternation. "What have I done?" "Nothing, Polly, but Graham is busy with his school friends." "And he likes them better than me. He turns me away now that they are here." I had some thoughts of consoling her, and of improving the occasion by inculcating some of those maxims of philosophy whereof I had ever a tolerable stock ready for application. She stopped me, however, by putting her fingers in her ears at the first words I uttered, and then lying down on the mat with her face against the flags. Nor could Warren or the cook root her from that position. She was allowed to lie, therefore, till she chose to rise of her own accord. See, now I'm thinking like 5, maybe, or 6. Just like, you didn't even want me to come to the party, so I'm just going to lie on the ground outside like a dog. Graham forgot his impatience the same evening, and would have accosted her as usual when his friends were gone, but she wrenched herself from his hand. Her eye quite flashed. She would not bid him good night. She would not look in his face. The next day he treated her with indifference, and she grew like a bit of marble. The day after he teased her to know what was the matter. Her lips would not unclose. Of course, he could not feel real anger on his side. The match was too unequal in every way. He tried soothing and coaxing. Why was she angry? What had he done? By and by, tears answered him. He petted her and they were friends. But she was one on whom such incidents were not lost. I remarked that never after this rebuff did she seek him or follow him, or in any way solicit his notice. I told her once to carry a book or some other article to Graham when he was shut up in his study. I shall wait till he comes out, said she proudly. I don't choose to give him the trouble of rising to open the door. Oh, okay, I don't like Polly, but her standing on her tiny dignity against Graham is actually... Yeah, Lucy is like an alive ghost. She's not a saber-tooth or a dentist, though, unless this reread is really going to surprise me. I don't think it is. It's quite hard to see Ivy's eyes out there. They're not as bright as Flora's. Young Bretton had a favourite pony on which she often rode out. From the window she always watched his departure and return. It was her ambition to be permitted to have a ride round the courtyard on this pony, but far be it from her to ask such a favour. One day she descended to the yard to watch him dismount. As she leaned against the gate, the longing wish for the indulgence of a ride glittered in her eye. Come on, Polly, will you have a canter? Asked Graham, half carelessly. I suppose she thought he was too careless. No, thank you, said she, turning away with the utmost coolness. You'd better, pursued he. You'll like it, I'm sure. Don't think I should care a fig about it, was the response. That is not true. You told Lucy Snow you longed to have a ride. Lucy Snow is a tatterbox, I heard her say. Her imperfect articulation was the least precocious thing she had about her. And with this, she walked into the house. Graham, coming in soon after, observed to his mother, Mamma, I believe that creature is a changeling. She is a perfect cabinet of oddities, but I should be dull without her. She amuses me a great deal more than you or Lucy Snow. This is the first time in the book that anyone, well, actually no, it might not be, but I think it's the first time in the book that anyone's referenced a conversation they've had with Lucy that proves that she isn't currently a ghost. It doesn't prove it, but it does prove other people can see and hear her. Miss Snow, said Paulina to me once. She had now got into the habit of occasionally chatting with me when we were alone in our room at night. Do you know on what day in the week I like Graham best? How could I possibly know anything so strange? Is there one day out of the 7 when he is otherwise than on the other 6? To be sure, can't you see? Don't you know? I find him the most excellent on a Sunday. Then we have him the whole day, and he is quiet, and in the evening, so kind. This observation was not altogether groundless. Going to church, etc., kept Graham quiet on the Sunday. In the evening, he generally dedicated to a serene, though rather indolent sort of enjoyment by the parlour fireside. He would take possession of the couch, and then he would call Polly. Graham was a boy not quite as other boys are. All his delight did not lie in action. He was capable of some intervals of contemplation. He could take a pleasure, too, in reading. Nor was his selection of books wholly indiscriminate. There were glimmerings of characteristic preference, and even of instinctive taste in the choice. He rarely, it is true, remarked on what he read, but I have seen him sit and think of it. That paragraph is so good. It's so good. Well, you know, he wasn't always a piece of shit like other boys. I mean, sometimes he did stop, running headfirst into a wall like the coyote chasing the roadrunner. He could read, actually, and the things he read weren't all complete garbage. It's so harsh. It's like the it's like a compliment that's also a set of knives. I love her. Polly, being near him, kneeling on a little cushion or the carpet, a conversation would begin in murmurs, not inaudible, though subdued. I caught a snatch of their tenor now and then, and in truth, some influence better and finer than that of every day seemed to soothe Graham at such times into no ungentle mood. Have you learned any hymns this week, Polly? I have learned a very pretty one, 4 verses long. Shall I say it? Fuck no. Speak nicely then, don't be in a hurry. The hymn being rehearsed, or rather half chanted in a little singing voice, Graham would take exceptions at the manner and proceed to give a lesson in recitation. She was quick in learning, apt in imitating, and besides, her pleasure was to please Graham. She proved a ready scholar. She is just dunking on everything start to finish. It's so good, including herself and like the nature of the world around her. Should have been great on Twitter. To the hymn would succeed some reading, perhaps a chapter in the Bible. Correction was seldom required here, for the child could read any simple narrative chapter very well. And when the subject was such as she could understand and take an interest in, her expression and emphasis was something remarkable. Sorry. Gesundheit to me. Joseph cast into the pit, the calling of Samuel, Daniel in the lion's den. These were favourite passages. Of the first, especially, she seemed perfectly to feel the pathos. Poor Jacob, she would sometimes say with quivering lips. How he loved his son Joseph. As much, she once added, as much, Graham, as I love you. If you were to die, and she reopened the book, sought the verse, and read, I should refuse to be comforted and go down into the grave to your mourning. With these words, she gathered Graham in her little arms, drawing his long tressed head towards her. The action, I remember, struck me as strangely rash, exciting the feeling one might experience on seeing an animal dangerous by nature, but half tamed by art, too heedlessly fondled. Not that I feared Graham would hurt or very roughly check her, but I thought she ran risk of incurring such a careless, impatient repulse as would be worse almost to her than a blow. On the whole, however, these demonstrations were borne passively. Sometimes even a sort of complacent wonder at her earnest partiality would smile not unkindly in his eyes. Once he said, You like me almost as well as if you were my little sister, Polly. Oh, I do like you, said she. I do like you very much. Which was the end of that section, but it's also my favourite pickup line, and yes, it's in that voice. I also wear a huge Victorian christening gown that I had commissioned to fit a curvy adult woman. Some people does put them off. The kind ones are the ones who call EPS, and then you're like, damn, that's a really good guy. So far, no luck. I was not long allowed the amusement of this study of character. She had scarcely been at Bretton 2 months when a letter came from Mr. Hone, signifying that he was now settled amongst his maternal kinsfolk on the continent, that as England was become wholly distasteful to him, he had no thoughts of returning thither, perhaps for years, and that he wished his little girl to join him immediately. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're all Lucy Snow stans. I'm going to write a whole new version of Dracula where instead of Lucy Westerner, it's Lucy Snow. I mean, Mina would still be the brains of the operation, but Lucy would definitely be the cyberbullying. I think that would probably cause Dracula to just retreat. I wonder how she will take this news, said Mrs. Bretton when she had read the letter. I wondered too, and I took it upon myself to communicate it. It doesn't sound bitchy until you say it in a bitchy voice, and then it's like, oh my god, of course. It's like, oh, this kid, Jesus, I'm gonna smack it down. I'm gonna tell her she has to leave. Repairing to the drawing room, in which calm and decorated apartment she was fond of being alone, and where she could be implicitly trusted, for she fingered nothing, or rather soiled nothing she fingered. I found her seated like a little odalisque on a couch, half shaded by the drooping draperies of the window near. She seemed happy. All her appliances for occupation were about her: the white wood workbox, a shred or two of muslin, an end or two of ribbon, collected for conversion into doll millinery. The doll, duly night-capped and night-gowned, lay in its cradle. She was rocking it to sleep, with an air of the most perfect faith in its possession of sentient and somnolent faculties, her eyes at the same time being engaged with a picture book which lay open on her lap. Lucy's dunking on this child for playing with dolls in an overly earnest way. Lucy. Miss Snow, said she in a whisper, this is a wonderful book. Candace, the doll, christened by Graham, for indeed its begrimed complexion gave it much of an Ethiopian aspect. Oh, Graham. Candace is asleep now, and I may tell you about it, only we must both speak low, lest she should waken. This book was given me by Graham. It tells about distant countries a long, long way from England, which no traveller can reach without sailing thousands of miles over the sea. Wild men live in these countries, Miss Snow, who wear clothes different from ours. Indeed, some of them wear scarcely any clothes, for the sake of being cool, you know, for they have very hot weather. Here is a picture of thousands gathered in a desolate place, a plain spread with sand, round a man in black, a good Englishman, a missionary who is preaching to them under a palm tree. I'm sure none of this will be troubling. She showed a little coloured cut to that effect. And here are pictures, she went on, more stranger, grammar was occasionally forgotten, than that. These are all in brackets in the middle of Polly's, dialogue. My cock voice. Thousands. Thousands and thousands of cocks. Tingle Mingle Nights is still very much a thing I'm going to keep doing. But yeah, Lucy literally has brackets in the middle of Polly's sentences to criticize her grammar and stuff. Great. There is the wonderful Great Wall of China. Here is a Chinese lady with a foot littler than mine. There is a wild horse of Tartary, and here, most strange of all, is a land of ice and snow, without green fields or woods or gardens. In this land they found some mammoth bones. There are no mammoths now. You don't know what it was, but I can tell you, because Graham told me. A mighty goblin creature as high as this room and as long as the hall. But not a fierce, flesh-eating thing, Graham thinks. He believes if I met one in a forest, it would not kill me, unless I came quite in its way, when it would trample me down amongst the bushes, as I might tread on a grasshopper in a hayfield without knowing it. Oh, absolutely. I'll do it. I don't care. I've got no reputation to lose. But so that's what a mammoth is, according to Polly. Thus she rambled on. That's the text. Polly, I interrupt. Should you like to travel? Not just yet, was the prudent answer, But perhaps in 20 years, when I am grown a woman, as tall as Mrs. Bretton, I may travel with Graham. We intend going to Switzerland and climbing Mount Blanc, and some day we shall sail over to South America and walk to the top of Chimborazo. But how would you like to travel now if your papa was with you? Her reply, not given till after a pause, evinced one of those unexpected turns of temper peculiar to her. What is the good of talking in that silly way? Said she. Why do you mention papa? What is papa to you? I was just beginning to be happy and not think about him so much. And there it will be all to do all over again. Her lip trembled. I hastened to disclose the fact of a letter having been received, and to mention the directions given that she and Harriet should immediately rejoin this dear papa. Now, Polly, are you not glad? I asked. Lucy! Oh, he's such a good Englishman, being a missionary to all these poor people who've never been properly oppressed. Oh, hi, Jessie. Hi, it's still about Polly and Graham. It's very annoying and boring. Polly, are you not glad? I added. She made no answer. She dropped her book and ceased to rock her doll. She gazed at me with gravity and earnestness. Shall you not like to go to papa? Of course, she said at last in that trenchant manner she usually employed in speaking to me, and which was quite different from that she used with Mrs. Bretton, and different again from the one dedicated to Graham. I wished to ascertain more of what she thought, but no, she would converse no more. Hastening to Mrs. Bretton, she questioned her, and received the confirmation of my news. The weight and importance of these tidings kept her perfectly serious the whole day. In the evening, at the moment Graham's entrance was heard below, I found her at my side. She began to arrange a locket ribbon around my neck. She displaced and replaced a comb in my hair, and while thus busy, Graham entered. Yeah, as Marilyn Manson once said, we're all beneficiaries now of colonialism. And Danny is being super sarcastic. Tell him by and by, she whispered. Tell him I am going. In the course of tea time, I made the desired communication. Graham, it chanced, was at that time greatly preoccupied about some school prize for which he was competing. The news had to be told twice before it took proper hold of his attention, and even then he dwelt on it but momently. Polly going? What a pity! Dear little Mousie, I shall be sorry to lose her. She must come to us again, mamma. And hastily swallowing his tea, he took a candle and a small table to himself and his books, and was soon buried in study. Graham! You fuck boy, but just for playing. I guess playboy, but playboy has its own connotations. Oh, Graham. Where's my lip balm? Shit. Soothing. Little Mousie crept to his side and lay down on the carpet at his feet, her face to the floor. Mute and motionless, she kept that post in position till bedtime. Once I saw Graham, wholly unconscious of her proximity, push her with his restless foot. She receded an inch or two. A minute after, one little hand stole out from beneath her face, to which it had been pressed, and softly caressed the heedless foot. When summoned by her nurse, she rose and departed very obediently, having bid us all a subdued good night. Oh, yeah. Graham's absolutely an idiot child. Then again, he is 16. They don't really teach you how to deal with, the feelings of small children whose fathers had to leave them at your mother's house for a few months. Because this is the olden days and everything sucks. I will not say that I dreaded going to bed an hour later, yet I certainly went with an unquiet anticipation that I should find that child in no peaceful sleep. The forewarning of my instinct was but fulfilled when I discovered her, all cold and vigilant, perched like a white bird on the outside of the bed. I scarcely knew how to accost her. She was not to be managed like another child. She, however, accosted me. As I closed the door and put the light on the dressing table, she turned to me with these words. I cannot sleep, and in this way I cannot live. I asked what ailed her. Dreadful misery, said she with her piteous lisp. Oh, come on, Lucy, you could have told me she had a lisp before that. I'm not putting it in. I'm not putting it in, Lucy. You told me too late. I'm not changing it. I love you, Lucy. I respect you. Shall I call Mrs. Bretton? That is downright silly, was her impatient reply. And indeed I well knew that if she had heard Mrs. Bretton's foot approach, she would have nestled quite as a mouse under the bedclothes. While lavishing her eccentricities regardlessly before me, for whom she professed scarcely the semblance of affection, she never showed my godmother one glimpse of her inner self. For her, she was nothing but a docile, somewhat quaint little maiden. I examined her. Her cheek was crimson, her dilated eye was both troubled and glowing, and painfully restless. In this state, it was obvious she must not be left till morning. I guessed how the case stood. Boston gangster accent, yeah. I can't do it. I won't even try. Would you like to bid Graham good night again? I asked. He has not gone to his room yet. She at once stretched out her little arms to be lifted. I'm thinking 6. Blimp. Folding a shawl around her, I carried her back to the drawing room. Graham was just coming out. She cannot sleep without seeing and speaking to you once more, I said. She does not like the thought of leaving you. I've spoilt her, said he, taking her from me with good humour and kissing her little hot face and burning lips. Polly, you care for me more than Papa now. I do care for you, but you care nothing for me, was her whisper. Tale as old as time, bitch. She was assured to the contrary, again kissed, restored to me, and I carried her away, but, alas, not soothed. When I thought she could listen to me, I said, Paulina, you should not grieve that Graham does not care for you so much as you care for him. It must be so. Her lifted and questioning eyes asked why. Because he is a boy and you are a girl. He is 16 and you are only 6. I got it! I've read this book before. Okay. That was really exciting. For a second, I thought I was like an adult prodigy. Guessing ages. He is 16 and you are only 6. His nature is strong and gay and yours is otherwise. I nailed it, yeah, but I have read this before. A couple times. But I love him so much. He should love me a little. Again, tale as old as time. He does. He's fond of you. You're his favourite. Am I Graham's favourite? Could be worse. Could have done it like that. Yes, more than any little child I know. The assurance soothed her. She smiled in her anguish. But, I continued, don't fret, and don't expect too much of him, or else he will feel you to be troublesome, and then it is all over. All over? she echoed softly. Then I'll be good. I will try to be good, Lucy Snow. Villette, tales as old as time. Villette, life is. It is what it is. Oh, God. Life is misery. I'm pretty sure Charlotte Bronte suffered from low-level depression her entire life. I put her to bed. Will he forgive me this one time? She asked as I undressed myself. I assured her that he would, that as yet he was by no means alienated, that she had only to be careful for the future. There is no future, said she. I am going. Prison.